Thank you for coming here today. The first question. Recently, long-term 4-year result from the LEADERS trial was published. Would you briefly introduce the key finding of the study, and would you explain the clinical impact on our future clinical practice?
Sure. To start with, the LEADERS trial was actually the first randomized so-called all-comers trial comparing the sirolimus-eluting cipher stent with the biodegradable polymer-based biolumus-eluting stent. And the study started recruitment in 2006, and the primary endpoint, which was a clinical composite of cardiac death, myocardial infarction, and target vessel revascularization, was recorded at 9 months and published in 2008 in The Lancet, which established non-inferiority of this newer generation stent versus the previous gold standard of the early generation drug-eluting stent, the cipher stent. Now, in the meantime, we have accumulated the 4-year follow-up data, and those findings again have been published in The Lancet at the end of last year, and they are notable for that the non-inferiority is confirmed out to 4 years, and that there's actually a strong trend in terms of superiority for the primary endpoint of major adverse cardiac events. And this reduction in major adverse cardiac events is largely driven by a significant reduction in very late stent thrombosis. That is, in the time period between 1 and 4 years, there actually was a relative risk reduction of 80% in the risk of a definite stent thrombosis as compared to the sirolimus-eluting stent. Now, what we also investigated whether this is a significant decrease in the risk of very late stent thrombosis beyond 1 year was associated with improved clinical outcome in terms of ischemic events. So we looked at events associated with stent thrombosis up to 1 year and beyond 1 year. And what we observed is that in events up to 1 year, there was no difference between the biolumus and the sirolimus-eluting stent. But for ischemic events, including cardiac death or myocardial infarction, there was a significant reduction in those events occurring beyond 1 year, indicating that these events associated with stent thrombosis did translate into a lower risk of cardiac death or myocardial infarction during the very late follow-up period. And so in summary, what the study provides proof for is that actually the hypothesis that biodegradable polymer-based drug-eluting stents may more behave like bare metal stents during the period when the polymer has degraded may actually be true. Obviously, that would need to be proven in a larger scale trial, but these results are hypothesis confirming into this direction.
So with many studies, would you briefly explain the future scenario of upcoming drug-eluting stents? What would be the winner after 5 years later among polymer-free drug-eluting stents, biodegradable polymer DES, or bioabsorbable stents?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, but to start with, I think one has to acknowledge that all newer generation drug-eluting stents we have available at this point in time, be it durable, eluting everolimus or sotarolemus, be it biodegradable like the biolumus-eluting stent, they certainly have improved clinical outcomes as compared with the early generation drug-eluting stents. And the important consideration there is to recognize that the improvement in safety in reducing the events of stent thrombosis were not associated or compromising the efficacy. On the contrary, if anything, the efficacy is at least as good as with the previous gold standard, the sirolimus-eluting stent, and potentially superior. So the question is, can you even improve further upon these newer generation drug-eluting stent? And first is an observation that most devices which will enter the market in the coming years will be biodegradable or polymer-based. So I would envision in the near future that most utilized drug-eluting stents will be biodegradable polymer-based. However, there are some interesting data with polymer-free drug-eluting stents which use either no polymer or polymer free substances which are polymer-like, but so-called amphitic substances with hydrophobic and hydrophilic properties, which mimic a polymer in releasing the drug over one certain period of time. And the initial results we have at this point in time are encouraging, but it is premature to say whether they will be compatible with polymer-based drug-eluting stents. And finally, there are the completely biodegradable so-called cardiovascular scaffolds, and there we also have a large body of evidence indicating that they are safe to use, and that they have the added feature that actually upon complete biodegradation they have restoration of coronary vasomotion within the stented segment, which per se is not possible with the use of metallic drug-eluting stents, which cage the coronary artery within this stent segment. But certainly it's premature to conclude what their respective role will be in the future.
During the current drug-eluting stent era, could you introduce your preference of a specific DES according to clinical or lesion characteristics?
I do not have a specific preference. As a matter of fact, we are rotating newer generation drug-eluting stent on a daily basis in our catheterization laboratory, which indicates that these newer generation drug-eluting stents can be utilized in a wide set of clinical and angiographic subsets, and therefore I do not have a specific flavor for one or the other. I do think that overall all newer generation drug-eluting stents have considerably improved safety and efficacy.
What about the clinical indication for a polymer-free drug-eluting stents, biodegradable polymer DES in near future?
There are studies planned to investigate such devices among patients who are not candidates for extended period of dual interpolated therapy, where the default therapy at this point in time are bare metal stents, and there certainly there's going to be an interesting niche indication.
Thank you for coming here, and thank you for your great answer today.